Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. This week my supporters on Patreon voted for Zimone, Paradox Sculptor, a blue-green +1/+1 counter deck. Our commander is a 4-mana 1/4, saying at the beginning of combat on our turn, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures we control, and then Zimone can also tap for a blue and a green to double the number of each kind of counter on up to 2 target creatures and or artifacts we control. Usually going to be targeting creatures with Zimone's ability, so this can be an excellent way to go over the top once we've already established a bit of a board presence. Maybe if there's a board stall, we can make sure our creatures get enormous quite quickly as well. So then if we take a look at our deck breakdown, I've split it up into a few different categories, starting with a bit of mana acceleration. We've got some 1 and 2 mana ramp creatures that can also maybe benefit from additional counters later on, and then some more expensive cards that also synergize with +1/+1 counters. Then we've got our +1 counter creatures, and we've got a good mix between cards that naturally end up with +1 counters and cards that need +1 counters to function, to enable their own abilities, to maybe make the team unblockable, or to help us find additional lanes, or maybe get even more counters going. And then we've got our non-creature counter cards, and these are typically artifacts and enchantments that help us double the number of counters we get or get additional counters each time and give us other rewards for getting counters on our creatures. And then last but not least, we've got some additional card draw to complement all these threats to make sure we don't run out of cards if we're up against removal heavy builds. So we've got a healthy amount of card draw sprinkled in, and that's also where the blue splash will come in handy. So that's our deck in a nutshell. Now for the deep dive, starting with our mana acceleration, can't go wrong with Chrome Mox helping us imprint a card to make an extra mana right away. Then I still like our Boreal Grazer here, since putting an extra land in play helps us ramp, and then an 0/3 can still turn into a bigger creature later once we put more counters on it. And then we've got our typical mana creatures, Birds of Paradise, Delighted Halfling, also relevant against counter spells, Elvish Mystic, and Eleanor Elves. And then Utopia Sprawl's pretty good in a deck with lots of forests to enchant. Then at 2 mana there's a Fanatic of Ronas, can actively make 4 mana once we get a creature to 4 power. Then there's the Heirloom, which can also help ramp out our creatures and can maybe give our creatures trample and draw extra cards with them. There's Incubation Druid, which definitely benefits from an extra counter from Zimone, so now it can tap for 3 mana as opposed to just 1. Rofellos also goes well with all those extra forests in the mana base. A Growth Spiral, one of our few non-creature ramp cards, can draw an extra card, put a land in play. Arcane Signet can immediately tap for any color. And then at 3 mana, the Kami also enhances the amount of +1 counters we get each time. There's a Rishkar, letting our counter creatures tap for mana and placing 2 +1 counters on our creatures when it enters. And then Uro, not particularly synergistic, but just a powerful Simic card that takes advantage of a full graveyard where we otherwise don't really make use of it. Then we've got our +1 counter creatures, starting with a few Evolve cards. Cloudfin Raptor can steadily pick up more +1 counters as we play larger creatures. Same with Experiment 1, which can later also maybe regenerate if we remove 2 counters from it to help protect it from a destruction effect. Then there's Belt Collector, also grows pretty similarly to our Evolve creatures, eventually gaining Trample. The Chocobo with Landfall picks up an additional counter, and then we've got some 2-drops that can put a +1 counter on any creature we control with Landfall. Bristly Bill, later also maybe doubling the number of counters we get for 5 mana, and then the Cub can also maybe double the number of counters if it triggered a second time in one turn. We've got Scavenging Ooze for a bit of graveyard hate. There's the Oran Reef Ooze at 3 mana, which rewards us for putting counters on our creatures and attacking. Then there's a Mossborn Hydra, another landfall card that can double the number of counters it gets each time, so then we want to make sure to stack as many counters on it as possible before we play our lands out, and then this can easily single-handedly win the game. Then there's Ornery Tumblewag, can also maybe double a creature's counters if we saddle it first. The Warden of the Grove can also end up with extra counters end of turn, which in turn will grow the rest of our team. And then Uroboroid has been an amazing addition for any +1 counter deck, and here especially where Zimone can put counters on it first before Uroboroid's trigger resolves, means we can add even more counters to the entire team. And then Goldvein Hydra is just a powerful creature with lots of keywords. Even if it dies, it will leave some treasures behind. Then we've got more creatures that synergize with +1 counters, a few ways to proliferate them, with Thrumming Bird, a flying creature, so if this hits the opponent we can add an extra counter to all permanents we control that have counters on them. We also have at 3 mana the Evolution Sage, which can proliferate with Landfall, and Bloated Contaminator, a 4/4 Trampler, which helps us proliferate if it hits the opponent. Then there's the Brute Scale making a spawn token every time it receives a +1 counter, so can trigger that multiple times, even outside of the adaptability. Then there's Evolution Witness, also pretty similar, lets us return something from the graveyard every time it picks up a +1 counter. Then Kodama helps us give our modified creatures trample, so that applies to every creature that has a counter on it, and if those manage to hit the opponent we now get to search up a land, so that can also help us ramp. Then Champion of Lamphold can essentially make our entire team unblockable if it becomes large enough. Herald of Secret Streams makes all our creatures that have counters on them unblockable. Then there's a Defiler of Vigor, which will also steadily grow the entire team, giving our green permanents a discount if we're willing to pay some life. Vorinclex can also double the number of counters we get while halving the opponents, very effective against opposing planeswalkers as well. And then there's the Wildwood Scourge, which will also steadily pick up more +1 counters, as we don't have a ton of Hydras in the deck, so this can also benefit from additional counters being placed. Then we've got our non-creature cards, with Hardened Scales being the cheapest variant, just gives us an additional +1 counter each time, so now Zimone essentially gives us 4 counters with a single trigger. Then a Snakeskin Veil gives us a bit of protection with Hexproof and a +1 counter. The Ozolith can also maybe transfer over some +1 counters from creatures that died. There's the Innkeeper's Talent, giving us an extra counter at the beginning of each combat, can also level it up to protect our permanents with counters on them and later double the number of counters we get. There's Ozolith, which also gives us an additional counter each time, can also activate it to give us essentially 2 +1 counters to begin with. Then there's Branching Evolution, simply doubling the number of counters we get. And then a Loading Zone has a similar effect, but can also be warped for a single green, otherwise 4 mana to deploy. And Earth Crystals also 4 mana to double the number of counters we get, but also gives our green spells a 1 mana discount, and can maybe activate for 6 mana to give us more counters in the first place. And then we've got a few more here with Tribute to the World Tree, can either draw cards if we play larger creatures, or have our creatures enter with 2 +1 counters on them. And then Hadana's Climb can also steadily give us additional counters each turn, eventually transforming into the Winged Temple, which can double a creature's power and give it flying until end of turn. And then our card draw section includes the Biomancer, which can pick up a counter and then let us draw and discard to improve our hand. There's Terra Symbiosis, which can draw us a ton of cards if we manage to put a lot of counters on a creature all at once. There's Beast Whisper, simply by casting our creature spells we get to draw. Zegana can draw once when it enters, also gives our modified creatures trample. We've got Sapsunen, which can also alternate between drawing cards and attacking, but with Zimone we can easily manipulate the number of counters on it, so we get the best out of it. And then there's Prime Speaker Zegana, which can also draw a ton of cards if we control a large creature. The Great Henge we can usually play for pretty cheap, and then makes it so every creature that enters picks up a counter and draws us a card. There's the Prodigy, which can also benefit from Zimone's counters, so we can draw an extra card each turn. And finally Hydroid Krasis, also a nice mana sink, can draw us cards when we cast it, in addition to gaining some life, so even if it gets countered, it provides a good amount of value. And then our mana base has a few useful utility lands, the Channel lands offering a bit of extra interaction, Castle Garenbrig helpful in casting our expensive green creature spells, especially the 6-drops, and then there's Ancient Tomb making 2 colorless mana at the cost of 2 life, and then we've got a healthy amount of fetch lands to get either a Breeding Pool, Hedge Maze to Surveil, or our basic lands, since we want lots of forests for Rofellos as well. And then Karn's Bastion, a land that can also tap for 4 mana to help us proliferate, can sometimes come in handy. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play, facing Betor, high toughness. Our hand's got potential. I think I start with Pelt Collector, and then play Fanatic. And then with Fanatic we can try and ramp out our 4-drops. Opponent with a Pilgrim. Pelt Collector only grows based on power and not toughness, it's a bit different from Evolve. But still fine to trade for the Pilgrim if they want to. And then Question now is Zimone first or Beast Whisper first? The sooner I play Zimone, the sooner I might be able to play a Great Henge. If we get something to 4 power especially. Although if I play Beast Whisper, I'll immediately start drawing cards. Opponent now with an Innkeeper. Ooh, Ocelots with Innkeeper can immediately start making extra tokens. Yeah, that's pretty good. I guess this is not the high toughness Betor, this is the life gain Betor, the author one. That makes more sense. Alright, Scythecat Cub, also a way to grow our creatures. If I go Cub, land on Pelt Collector up to 3, still not enough to enable Fanatic. So, might still be a Zimone turn, or just play Beast Whisper. Pass a turn. And then next turn try to cast a few more creature spells. Marauder, I guess I'll sack the Pelt Collector. So the Ocelot will trigger once again. And then once Betor enters, they can add more counters to their creatures. And maybe return the Marauder from the graveyard. So there's a lot going on. Elvish Mystic, an expendable creature, draws with Beast Whisper. Can play Cloudfin, and then still play the Cub. Alright, so this was a decent Beast Whisper turn at least. Couldn't find the lane, sadly. Might actually sack the Cloudfin if they bring back the Marauder. And there's Betor. Growing Cloudfin would be a way to perhaps stop Betor from hitting me in the air. We'll see if they get back the Ocelots. I guess that's not how that works. Oh, they have to lose life to return creatures. Okay. So, in that case, what's my sequence? If I go Mossborn land, I can put the Cub counter on Mossborn before we double, and then this makes 4 mana. So that seems like a good sequence. First the Cub, then the Hydra. So now I can run out the Great Henge, and then still play a Brute Scale, which will immediately make an Eldrazi token. And then already played lands, but I can still play Prodigy for X equals 0 just to pick up the Henge counter. Draw with the Beast Whisper. Alright, so we're kind of doing it, and then, yeah, probably fine to play Ozolith. Definitely overextending into a potential board wipe. Still don't have any great attacks. But if we can keep our Henge, we still have a source of card advantage post-sweeper. Now Sorin, giving their creatures lifelink. Can also return stuff from the graveyard. And the skies are clear for Betor to attack. But we might be able to beat some 1/1 tokens once the Hydra gets big enough. Cloudfin can finish off Sorin, perhaps. And what do I sacrifice? Probably the Lenor Elves, or Elvish Mystic, rather. We'll draw with a Prodigy. Okay, so I want to play my fetch lands and make this Hydra enormous. In fact, I don't sack the Vista yet. I first want to go for Hadana's Climb. Can I even play Zimone? I should be able to play Zimone. Play Hadana's Climb. And then we only want to fetch with Vista at the last possible second. So go to attackers. Get these counters. All on the Hydra. Unless we fear instant speed removal, which is possible. But I think I still try. And then Zimone can go maybe one here. One here. And then now we can fetch. Counter here. Double, and then Hydra can attack face. Cloudfin goes after Sorin. And we can still activate the Winged Temple. And that's well over lethal. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing the Fire Dancer. So, can make a bunch of tokens. And they're gonna cast lots of instants and sorceries. This hand feels a little clunky on the draw, lots of threes. And this is better. And we've got our accelerants, maybe one too many. But then we can set up an early Warden or Contaminator. Well, opponent's got the Ragavan, so I was maybe gonna start with birds, now I need to start with something that can block. Although pretty likely that our creature gets removed and then Ragavan can take over. I'll take the trade. Alright, so I get to double one drop after all. Earth Crystal, also good to get down early to get the discount. But seems like they have at least one answer in hand. Alright, we get to untap. If I were to play Earth Crystal, I still wouldn't be able to cast anything else this turn. A red could also have artifact removal. So I think I'm leaning Contaminator here. Or let's see. I guess never mind, I can use Castle Garenbrig to cast both 3-drops this turn, which I wasn't really counting on. The Warden a little bit more vulnerable than the Contaminator, admittedly. And then next turn we'll see. Possible they're just waiting to cast a board wipe. I see. Sunspine Lynx, and luckily only have the one non-basic. And then now, do we prefer Earth Crystal into Halfling, or I can play Zimone? Can't quite Earth Crystal into Zimone. Yeah, I guess Contaminator can attack into the Lynx regardless. Zimone putting a counter on it would let us proliferate, so that's the upside. Still kind of like the Earth Crystal first. And then I can also decide not to attack. Put a +1 counter on the Halfling, turns into 2 with Earth Crystal. And this will get 2 more counters end of turn. And then I can wait for a big attack with a Contaminator once we get more counters from Zimone, which will get doubled by the Earth Crystal. And then now we can surveil end of turn. So our opponent plays their commander. copies the links. Could fetch basic island in response. I think I would still rather surveil, so then it doesn't matter if I fetch now or not. Okay. Take 5. And don't need Misty. Ouroboros, now that's a card. So can easily play it alongside Zimone. And with a Warden, this is gonna go crazy. First Zimone, counters on Ouroboros and on the Trampler. Oh yes. And that's one lethal looking attack, although never mind, I guess their opponent could survive if they double jump, take 24 down to 1. But yeah, that's not a game that they're winning. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Sorin, black-white. Our hand has potential, could use an extra land to go with a Grazer. So now go for Halfling. Alright, a land is good. So I can play the Verge, go Raptor into Grazer, which will then grow the Raptor, or we can just play Kodama, and if there's no removal next turn with Zimone, we can put counters on Kodama, but that seems unlikely against black removal. So I would rather get multiple creatures with counters on them, so then once we are ready to deploy Kodama, we'll immediately get a lot of value. Now the Halfling doesn't actually tap for mana this turn, since we couldn't make green for Hardened Scales. Opponent with a Palantir. That's fine, we'll lose a bit of life. Alright, that's 6 damage, not bad. Ouroboros isn't bad either. So we have options. Could go Hardened Scales into Kodama, although I only get 1 land from that exchange. With Ouroboros, we immediately get a bunch of counters, or I could play Zimone, which then sets up Ouroboros to give even more counters. I think I like the sequence of Ouroboros setting up Kodama. So even if they have removal, we will get a bunch of lanes, which then sets up Hydroid. Hope they don't have a board wipe. Alright, Anguish the Making, that's fine. That's what we expected. So we'll lose a bit more life. Yeah, that's 10 damage. They've got a lot of Planeswalkers, so this is a Super Friends style of deck, which typically does have sweepers in it. So I think the best course of action is still Hardened Scales into Kodama, which will then set up a lot of mana for Hydroids, which is a way we can stabilize. Mostly 1 forest, can maybe get 1 island. Because we do have 4 fellows in the deck. So do we see a board wipe? Nope, just Sorin. Makes a vampire. Now they get to draw, since I don't want to just die. Alright, so do I play Zimone? Opponent is at 9, so if I do play Zimone, counter on Kodama, counter on Grazer. I can maybe wait another turn on Hydroid, hope it doesn't get discarded, and then we'll be in great shape. Double the counters from Hardened Scales, basically. And if I go face with everyone, that's 8 plus 5 is 13, so yeah, they would just be dead here as well. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Ureni, Teamer Dragons. Our hands, okay, maybe a little bit light on action, but I'll try it. I can go turn 1 Prodigy for X equals 1, pitching Raptor to Chromox. Then we'll get to draw right away, and then eventually Zimone can put more counters on it to draw more. But ideally we draw into a 3-drop, of which we have many, so we get to curve out. So not the most threatening creature here, but the extra cards will come in handy. Did not find a 3-drop yet, and yeah, that's 2 lands in a row, so could be in trouble. If they have any counterplay for Zimone or an empty. Fearsome Whelp is pretty effective too. And there's the Experiment one. Still gonna run out Zimone. But our opponent already gets to ramp out some big dragons. Can maybe bounce one with Otawara. But the discount is perpetual, so that's gonna keep getting bigger and bigger. And now the debut, another pretty busted alchemy card, giving their next dragon a 2-mana discount in addition to the 2 discount from Fearsome Whelp. So yeah, it's not looking good. But I can play Experiment 1, Kodama, attack. And then counter here. This needs to remove 2 counters to regenerate. I think we still make Zimone bigger. Don't want to fix my opponent's mana with Yavimaya, just in case. Making a large reach creature could be helpful against the dragons, but we'll see. It's going to be an Ancient Silver Dragon, normally 8 mana. So any way I can block that profitably, probably just going to have to bounce it. Which I guess I can do now. And then I gotta keep up the pressure. Any point in activating Zimone, I think we just attack. And then counter on Kodama, counter on probably Zimone. We will get a bunch of lanes here, but don't have any way to spend that mana. So they no longer have the discount from the debut, but they still have the discount from the Whelp. And I'll keep the land in hand. We might find some landfall cards. It's going to be an Orb of Dragonkind. So this one now costs 6 mana. And yeah, our opponent scoops it up, so Otawara saves the day. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Lazlo. And our hand has potential. Our fellows can make a lot of mana with our forests, sets up a big Hydroid. So we'll see how that lines up. Of course, mono red is going to have a fair share of removal as well. Still gonna try a Lenor Elves first. That way next turn I can go Rafello's Tapped Hedge Maze. If they burn the Elves, then my turn's not all that exciting, because I wouldn't be able to play either one of my 2-drops. Opponent playing a menace creature, which will then make treasure once they deploy their commander. But it's gotta be Rofellos here. And then the Chocobo doesn't seem impactful enough. Additional forests are good. So Lazlo suspecting itself, and then we are taking 2. They could still have a burn spell with a treasure, but we get to untap. Alright, so Rofellos makes just 2 mana here. So what's my best sequence? Probably involves Ancient Tomb. Do we want to play Bristly Bill? Or maybe Earth Crystal should be the priority. Can go Earth Crystal, Bill, play a land. Yeah, that seems like a fine starting point. Won't be able to play anything else. A little bit short of playing Zimone. Could also get the Thrumming Bird going, and then next turn play Bill. Because yeah, it's not like I'm going to be able to block the menace creatures anyway. So, yeah, maybe we play Thrumming Bird right now. And then next turn with Zimone, we can immediately start proliferating. Yeah, it's not often that you don't want to run out Ancient Tomb as soon as possible. Another menace creature, this one blitzed. So they get to make a bunch of treasure. And we'll see what they can ramp out. Equips the beat stick. Could even see an Ember Cleave here. Alright, dodge that one. Still 4 mana, second main. And yeah, we're not going to be able to slow them down anytime soon. A big score, making more treasure. And flick a coin, a very nice answer to Rofellos. Anything else? So as the dust settles, they're back down to 1 treasure. We get to untap. And we gotta make the most out of it. Bristly Bill plus Zimone seems like a good starting point, and then I don't even have to play Ancient Tomb yet. I don't think I need Boseiju to take out any artifact here. Can save myself the damage. Counter on Thrumming Bird itself. Keep the Lenore Elves as an extra blocker to stop the menace. And then counters here and here, so we get to proliferate as much as possible. Alright, so now we've got some sizable blockers. This is gonna maybe ping me to death with the treasures. Pillage, make 2 more. Well, if we can at least stop the attacks, that would be a small victory. Not sure if they have any Act of Treason effects to steal my creatures. Doesn't appear to be the case. Lazlo still attacking. Zimone's definitely blocking. Then the question is, do I double block with Bill, maybe lose Bill to a 3 damage burn spell, or do I double block with the elves? I think I'm still fine blocking with Bill and taking the 2-for-1. Even though the ability of doubling our counters could come in handy. We can still sink mana into a large Hydroid. Alright, no burn spell on Bill, so we get to untap with everything. And is there a chance I can just win here? So we get to play a land, which gives me 2 more counters with Bristly Bill. Can put those on probably the Thrumming Bird as our evasive threat. Then we get to move to attackers. Zimone gives us 2 counters, 1 on Elves, 1 on Thrumming Bird, which gets doubled by Earth Crystal. And then I think we just activate Bill, which will then double all the counters, which once again gets doubled by the Earth Crystal. So that should be more than enough, especially if there's no meaningful interaction. And yeah, our opponent scoops it up. I was just double checking the math, but yeah, if our opponent doesn't have anything, we should have plenty of damage to spare. If we have a look here with Zimone, putting 2 counters on Elves, 2 more on Thrumming Bird, so that's a 9/9 with 8 counters. Activate Bill, doubling those 8 counters, which then gets also doubled by Earth Crystal. So I'm pretty sure Thrumming Bird by itself would be lethal here, but then we should have some other creatures going through as well. So plenty of damage to spare. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Arwen, green-white, +1 counters. And yeah, we've got a Keeper. Think I'm pitching Experiment 1 to Chromox, so we can play turn 1 Incubation Druid. And hopefully use that early start to our advantage. The sooner we get Beast Whisper in play, the better. Alright, turn 2 it is. And then next turn I could even go Defiler into a free Pelt Collector at the cost of 2 life. Draw 2 of Beast Whisper. Zimone also better now that we can put counters on Incubation Druids and then immediately tap it for 3 mana. Although I don't think it's quite as good as Defiler, which will naturally also end up placing counters on Incubation Druids, and now we even drew another green 1-drop that I get to cast right away. So yeah, that's turn 3. Pretty impressive. And then next turn we can run out our commander. Arwen's indestructible, so no point in attacking. And then Heirloom can provide additional card advantage. Trample can also come in handy. Conclave Mentor can also synergize with +1 counters. But wow, opponent scoops it up. Yeah, they're just too far behind after that explosive start. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Soul of Windgrace, so a Jund landfall, sometimes land destruction deck. Gonna need to have some mana creatures in case our lands get blown up, so I don't think this is gonna work. This one with Kodama can net us additional lands. Missing a good 2 mana play, but maybe it's still keepable. Hoping for any 2-drop we can cast. And then hopefully curve into Kodama, get some extra lanes. And then we can leverage that mana. Alright, Thoughtseize can now take away Kodama. Contaminator, still a reasonable replacement, as it can also grow our other +1 counter creatures. But yeah, opponent takes Kodama, draw an Ooze. So not quite what we were hoping for. Opponent's got a Paradise Druid, so next turn they can play Soul of Windgrace. Which is a 5/4, can still attack into it with Contaminator, especially once it gets counters from Ooze or ideally Zimone. And we're getting closer to casting the Great Henge. Nylea's Intervention's gonna find a land, maybe a Strip Mine, which they can then keep getting back with Soul of Windgrace. Yep. Well, we'll still be able to play the Ooze, but that's maybe the last card I'm casting this game. Save the Breeding Pool. So if they don't strip mine me, I can run out Zimone, and we should be able to play the Henge if the Contaminator lives. Okay, so I hope our opponents had their fun strip mining us, but hopefully we get to just run over them regardless. Evolution Sage isn't bad either. Maybe I should play Zimone while I have the chance, even though Great Henge would be fun. Get to evolve Experiment 1. Zimone puts counter on Oran Reef Ooze, and then second one maybe on Experiment 1 as well. Ooze attacks, I get to put a +1 counter on each creature that has a counter on it, and then Contaminator's gonna trample over, letting us proliferate once again, and our opponent's probably just dead on board here. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Kotis. This is not the indestructible one, more of a graveyard Kotis deck. Our hand seems functional. Can play turn 2 Heirloom, turn 3 Zimone, or we can maybe get the Brute Scale in play first, so we get immediate value from the counter in case there's removal. Deathrite will shut down the graveyards. So yeah, I'll still go for Boseiju, because I might want triple green, so I don't want to play this on blue. And then next turn, we've got a few options. Heirloom can make blue for Zimone, so can still play this on green if I'd like. Playing Tribute before we play Brute Scale also makes sense. I guess I'm not opposed to going Tribute and then play Gold Vein for 0. Does that work? I guess it would die before it gets the counters, because it's whenever a creature enters, it's not as it enters. So probably don't want to make that play. Yeah, Tribute's tempting. Could also play Hydra for 3. Or even Loading Zone Warped, play Hydra for 2, which is in 4. I think we just play the Tribute. And then next turn we can make a move. Ideally draw lands, and then I can maybe play multiple cards. This opponent could run out Kotis. They could ramp into a 4-drop by exiling a land with Deathrite. And they're gonna pass. So presumably with some interaction available. If it's not a counter spell, I like going for Gold Vein. Can cast one X equals 4. Or we could double spell Brute Scale with a Gold Vein, which is maybe fine too. So let me start there. So we get our spawn. This one also gets 2 counters. This will fetch Breeding Pool, so we have blue mana in case we need it. And then, yeah, we could go for Zimone, could go for Gold Vein. It's not the end of the world if they have removal for Zimone. But getting to put another counter on Brute Scale gives me another Eldrazi token. So that was a pretty good turn. And then next turn we have options, as our opponent's going to fill the graveyard with Cash Grab. See Woestrider, we see Chatterfang. Those are creatures that are capable of setting up some 2-card infinite combos, or 3-card combos sometimes. So yeah, I have to be careful. Next turn, maybe interested in warping Loading Zone and setting up a large Gold Vein. The Vessel can turn into a demon if it returns out of the graveyard. Okay, for now, Let's warp. And I think we just sink all our mana into the Gold Vein. Could also activate Zimone. If I play this for 4, it enters with 8 counters, as opposed to playing it for 2, it enters with 4. I can activate Zimone. I guess it would technically be more, although it's weaker in the face of removal. I guess I can even play it for 3 here with a spawn. But I do have to sack it now. So yeah, X equals 3. Alright, opponent's gonna scoop it up. So as we said, enters with 3 times 2 is 6 counters. Then we let the Zimone trigger resolve first, so normally 1 counter, now it's 2. So we're already up to 8 counters, and then we activate Zimone to double. Normally go from 8 to 16, but because of a loading zone, that's plus another 8, so that's 24 trample. And then in the meantime, our Brute Scale also picked up a ton of extra counters from doubling from Zimone, and we even get an extra token. So maybe not exactly lethal, but about as close as you can get here. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Uharis, the Stormspinner, and we've got a keepable hand. Turn 1, probably just gonna fetch, although probably want to save the fetch for the Chocobo actually. So I'll have to take 1. Next turn, I could go Heirloom, Chocobo, and then play the fetch land. Opponent's got a Ragavan. And we even found a Llanowar Elves, so this turn's going to be pretty awesome. Just fetch a forest. So pretty epic turn 2. Can block Ragavan profitably. And next turn we can play out Zimone. There's also an argument for Earth Crystal into Willowrush Verge. Opponent taking out our Halfling. And Rofellos the draw. So cannot quite play the Earth Crystal until I play the land first. So this feels more like a Zimone turn. Don't really need the mana from Rofellos. At this point also only have the 1 forest. And then I think we put a counter on Zimone ourselves, get her up to 5 toughness. Because there are some 4 damage burn spells. And yeah, opponent just scoops it up here. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Cloud. So Naya equipment. We've got Mystic into turn 2 Kami. And then the Kami can generate blue for Zimone. Yeah, I'll try it. A lot of dual lands we can draw as well in case the Kami gets removed. All my fetch lands can get blue. But the deck, of course, primarily green, just splashing a bit of blue. Canvas Outfitter, powerful alchemy card to discount your equip costs. Especially good with Colossus Hammer. This turn it's got to be Kami, and then hope to untap with it. And then we have options next turn, including Hardened Scales plus Zimone. So far so good. And we found blue mana as well. Yeah, this seems fine to me. Could also play Zimone, get counters, and then second main play Champion. Is that better? Yeah, maybe I could see the advantage of doing that. One here. This now taps for 3. Play Champion, and then next turn I'll have an extra attacker. Upside of Hardened Scales is we make our creatures even larger to begin with. But yeah, Sword of Forge and Frontier with only 1 mana equip costs. Opponent decides to attack as opposed to staying back with her pro-green. I guess because Champion would make her stuff unblockable anyways. But yeah, pro-green is what you want in this matchup. They found Fire and Ice, but no mana to cast it. So Hardened Scales could activate Zimone, which may be worth it. And wow, opponent just scoops it up. So we can do a little bit of math. So Hardened Scales is 1 additional counter. This also adds 1 additional counter. So Zimone essentially gives us 6 counters total. Could put 3 here, 3 here. Then we activate Zimone on Kami and Champion. Kami goes from 5 counters times 2 plus 2 is 12. Champion goes from 3 counters times 2 plus 2 is 8. So it's still not quite a lethal attack, but very close. And if our opponent can't answer our creatures here, they're in serious trouble. Alright, so we get to see this blue-green +1 counter deck in action, and yeah, Zimone's a powerful commander. The blue splash allows for just a little bit more than your typical mono-green +1 counter decks, and the archetype keeps getting better with more expansions adding +1 counter cards, such as recently the Uruboroid, which has been amazing for the archetype as well. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.